Hi, this is Rebecca Wackerly. Thank you so much for coming to watch this, my second video that I have ever posted on YouTube. Today I'm going to be working with the stamp Heartfelt by Purple Onion Designs. It's illustrated by Stacy Ucola, and I hope I'm saying her last name correctly, but she's a wonderful illustrator, and I absolutely love every design that she has over at the Purple Onion Designs website. Be sure to check them out. As you can see, Purple Onion Design stamps are red rubber. They are unmounted, so you'll need to place them on some sort of block for stamping. I've just designated my Fiskars stamp press as what I use for my Purple Onion designs. I've used the Tombow repositionable mono adhesive and just ran a little bit on the stamp press and then attached my stamp right to where the adhesive is and inked up my image and then stamped it. I did ink it with the My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink. That's what I use for all my Copic coloring. Using the adhesive will not hurt the stamp press. You can get it off with some rubbing alcohol and it attaches the stamp just well for stamping. I wanted to make my mouse in a little scene similar to like a snow scene, but I'm going to be doing a little something different, and you'll see with the background. But I wanted to give him something to be standing on, so I used the My Favorite Things Surf and Turf Dynamics to give myself a little bit of a template for the snowdrift he'll be standing on, and I just traced that really lightly with a pencil. For his ears, I used the YR000, and I gave his ears an overall color with that, going pretty close to the edge. I then went with my E53, which is my darkest color, and colored in the bottoms of his ear a little bit around the top and there in the corners where any sort of shadow would be, and I blended it out with the E50. I also did this for his belly, which you can see is below the heart, and his tail, which is super skinny. So give yourself a little bit of room to go outside of the lines when you color his tail, and it's okay. It's all right. It happens to everybody. There's nothing we can really do about it when the image is so small. Plus, we'll be covering it up, as you'll see here in a few minutes. For the heart, I used my R89, my R29, R27, R24, and R22. These are my go-to R's. I love a true red, and this combination is very true red. It's beautiful. I started with my darkest marker, again went where the shadows were, and just drew in real fine lines. The R89 is a very strong color, so I just went around the outsides of that. Underneath his hands where there would be shadow, and then just worked progressively out to the R29, 27, 24, and then 22, and just made sure the blend is as best I could get it. Now for his body, I have found a new love, and it is the E40 series in the Copic markers. They are a great series of browns, beigey brown, E41, E43, and E44 are the ones that I'm using, and kind of a clay color, a ivory, let's see, they're calling it dull ivory, but they really are great colors for critters. And I wanted to keep him light, but still with a lot of defined shadow. So I started with the E44 and went wherever there would be shadows and around his little head to give him some dimension. And I blended the E44 out with the E43. I like to keep all my critters' faces nice and bright, so I filled in most of his face with the E41, as you can see, and then just kept blending and blending and blending until I achieved the look I was going for. I did add a little bit above his nose too, because you know a little mouse would have a little nose and it would have some definition. So I added a little bit of the E43 above that and then just blended it in with the E41. Now I decided with this card, since I was creating a scene, that I wanted a little bit of a darker background, something that would be soft and somewhat maybe romantic, I suppose. So I needed to create a mask, and I used the Inkadinkado masking paper, stamped the image, and then cut it out, fussy cut it out. When I fussy cut for a mask, I always cut on the inside of the stamped line. And as you can see, I took some time to make sure I had it lined up pretty good on my image. But guess what? I didn't have it perfect lined up on my image, but we can fix that. That's okay as well. So for my inking, I used the Distress ink in Vintage Photo and Gathered Twigs. I kept the Vintage Photo closer to the mouse and a little bit closer to where that snowdrift would be. I wanted those areas a little bit lighter, and then progressively worked out into the Gathered Twigs, which is a little bit darker. Now, as you can see here, I'm not the best inker in the world. It's a little splotchy and looks a little bit uneven. But one thing I have found with Distress inks is they might not look so hot right out of the gate, but give it some time. They seem to settle into your paper and end up looking a lot better after a few minutes than they might when you're initially working on the project. So give it a little bit of time. Don't trash it yet. Plus, I'm also going to be die cutting this panel out and making it a little bit smaller. You can see I have a big goof, a big old circle up towards the top of this there that I'm trying to work out. But because I'm going to be die cutting, I end up cutting that out anyway. So it ends up okay in the end. Now, when I'm inking, I am using the Ranger Round ink applicator, which I do really like. I love the round much better than the old square one. I was just going to have the brown fade into the snowdrift, but I decided I needed something a little bit more defined. So I took that die cut that I originally drew my the snowdrift with and just lined it up and then inked over top of that. Now here's where we fix my terrible masking. You see there's a small line around his ears and his head. And I of course, couldn't go back over it with the ink blender. That would just get all over my image. So I decided to take one of my Prismacolor pencils in light umber and just very, very lightly go around his head anywhere where I could see that I didn't have the mask placed correctly. Now, because it's a pencil, you know, the lighter you press, the lighter the color. So it's pretty easy to achieve a look that it looks pretty good against the Vintage Photo and Gathered Twigs. And in the end, you really can't see it very much. So, in fact, if you do see it, it just looks like a little bit more of a shadow and really gives the mouse a little bit more definition, which is great. So if you ever make a mistake like this, just look for another medium you have to fill in and correct your mistakes. Now I realized if my mouse was standing there that he was going to need a little bit of a shadow. So for this I used my warm grays. I used W3, W1, and the colorless blender. I started with the W3 and colored in where the darkest shadows would be, which are directly underneath the mouse. And behind him, the snowdrift somewhat curved, so I just made sure I followed the curve of the snowdrift. Once I applied the W3, I blended it out with the W1, and then gave it an overall coloring with the colorless blender. I wanted to use frame this little guy out, and I used the My Favorite Things Dynamics Stitched Rectangle Scalloped Edge frames. I lined it up and placed my sentiment where I wanted to be to make sure everything would fit, and I ran it through my die cutting machine, which I still use a Cuttlebug. And it's working just fine for me. One day I will own a Big Shot, but for now I'm pretty happy with my Cuttlebug. So once I had him cut out, I went ahead and stamped my image, which is from the My Favorite Things Essential Sentiments, and it says, "Love You More." I also cut out a white frame and attached that to a card base with my multi-matte adhesive and went ahead and just stuck in my card panel with my mouse on it as well. And I thought he looked pretty cute. I did add a few hearts that are from the Blueprints 11 by My Favorite Things as well, just to give it a little bit more red. I covered the little hearts and the large heart the mouse is holding with some glossy accents, and then I was done. Thanks for watching my video. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more.